may be wondering, why would you buy a 335 Xi? Much less, why would you buy a BMW at all? Well, I'll tell you, I was reluctant. I've seen a lot of mixed stuff about Beamers as a whole, that they're very unreliable, that they break easily. Well, I guess part of that's what I'm going to discover. I'm planning on doing a whole video on my new channel about this, but I'm going to go ahead and talk about a couple of reasons that I decided to get this car. I don't want to drive a boring car. No, I don't think it's stupid to say. Yeah, I really just didn't want to drive a boring car. Every car I've had has been a sports car, particularly because, I don't know, you spend a lot of time in your car, commuting to work, going to see people. I live particularly far away from some of my friends, and I spend more time in the car on my way to see them. Getting straight to the point, I'll tell you, besides the Mitsubishi Eclipse GSX, one of my favorite cars is actually the E92 BMW M3, which I thought I'd never own. I figured BMWs are way too expensive to own and to maintain. They're statistically, they cost a lot more than your typical car to keep up with. However, it occurred to me that the money that I was putting into building and maintaining a car from 20 years ago, which I love nonetheless, I could actually maybe even more easily own another car. And obviously it's not an M3. What caused me to buy this car in particular? Well, my friend actually showed me his 2016 BMW 340i with xDrive, and I was really intrigued. He took me for a ride in it, he let me take it for a spin, and I was like, wow. And I could see why they call it the ultimate driving machine. But still, like, that wasn't enough to convince me to go take such a huge leap into that world of Euro. However, I needed a new daily. My Acura RSX Type S gave up on me. It made it quite a long way. It made it to 205,000 miles. So I looked at a few things, and honestly, there wasn't anything within my range that I was actually interested in driving. And then I learned the price of the 335s from the generation M3 that I loved. I actually almost bought an E46 BMW M3 before I bought the Eclipse. I came pretty close, but I was scared out of it. My mechanic was like, don't do that, basically. Freaked me out. And not just him, like, a lot of people will ward you off BMW. I don't blame them. However, I think things ultimately played out for the best. I got a couple of other people's input. I've actually always been a fan of forced induction. I love turbochargers, and I loved driving my Mitsubishi Eclipse GST with its turbo. What I didn't know was that there was a car that somewhat resembled the M3 that actually had a twin turbocharged engine. So, much to my shock, I discovered the BMW 335xi, which also included all-wheel drive, much like the Eclipse GSX. Realizing this, it sort of changed the game for me. I was like, well, I could keep putting in a lot of money to build and maintain this 20-year-old car, which I love, but is really starting to conflict with the other practical things going on in my life. Or I could get something that would consistently run, and that money that I'd be spending building it anyway would go into maintaining this car. Ultimately, when it came down to it, I thought I'll take the leap of faith. I bought this car. I originally planned on keeping both, but it did cross my mind, like it occurred to me at one point, since I like this one so much, after a few months, because I really wasn't sure how I was going to feel about it down the line. But after a few months, I was like, hey, I really like how this is going, and considering the pros and cons, maybe it wouldn't hurt. Well, it would hurt. Maybe it would be for the best to give up the Eclipse and put my energy into this new car. The E92 BMW M3 has a V8 engine, and I hear they're really strong, really efficient. They sound amazing. They actually cost twice as much as the 335i. That's not what would ward me away. Like I said, I was also really interested in the E46 M3. However, when I heard turbocharged, all-wheel drive. Even with the problems that go along with those, I would have been dealing with them anyway with my other dream car. One of the factors that changed that was that this car was 10 years newer. You know, these things look new. They actually hold up well in terms of how they look on the street with other cars. A lot of cars that are 10 years old now, you can tell. And I don't know, maybe you can tell by looking at this car, but from my perspective at least, this car is a pretty beautiful car. With the lines and everything, it looks like it could have been made just a few years ago. And it feels like 10 years ago wasn't that long ago anyway, but really, I was scared to take this on. To some extent, I still am. My friend actually offered to help me work this out. He's actually very mechanically inclined, and he offered me something that I just simply did not have in the past, and that was help. I've had mechanical friends, I've had the community around me to be able to help me work on the Eclipse. However, I didn't really find anyone who would hands-on alongside me really show me how it's done. My friend Jimmy, you can actually go to his channel. It is No Clutch Garage. He's the one who owns the 2016 340, and he was like, hey, these things are much less expensive when you work on them yourself. And I was like, easier said than done. Everyone's afraid to touch BMWs, at least as far as I'm aware. Does not sound like a good idea. I'm no mechanical genius, and Jimmy has definitely helped me over the largest humps in the road. But still, this isn't as bad as I thought it was going to be, especially going from working on a 20-year-old car to dealing with something from 10 years ago that obviously is a little more updated. The upkeep is easier. It's just simply easier. I'm really into it. One of the things I had to give up was the manual transmission, and I do really miss it. I really love driving stick. However, these things, automatic transmissions, aren't terrible. You can actually tune the transmissions and make them respond faster. It's not that I haven't missed driving stick, but I was ultimately able to give that up in order to enjoy the rest of the car. However, if there weren't paddle shifters, I probably would not have jumped into this thing. This thing is also just fast, and honestly, I've never really cared about going fast. I've always just wanted to be able to enjoy the drive. I was fine with making a bunch of noise while going a little slower than everybody else, but it sort of threw me into a new world, being able to get into something that just stock gets you a lot further in a shorter amount of time than a four-banger. And I've also really enjoyed the lack of restriction when you turn on the air conditioning. I'm able to drive normally with the air conditioning on, and it doesn't hinder my engine. I don't know if you've heard of that, but in most four-cylinder engines, you turn on the air, you lose power. It's just how it goes, but you don't really have that problem from V6s and up, or i6s and inline 6. One thing I wasn't sure if I'd like was the automation, and cars have become extremely automated. I don't know how I feel about the new cars of any brand, of any make and model. However, even for 10 years ago, this is one of the more technologically advanced vehicles. However, it's not completely reliant on that. I do have the iDrive system in this particular car. There are versions that come without it, but there have been some specific instances that have made me really appreciate having just the right amount of automation in this car. For one, I hit a massive pothole. It was depressing. I was on my way to a car meet, fell in a massive pothole. I was scared, and obviously it did some damage, but I wasn't sure how much yet. However, we're about to leave a gas station, and then I get an alert on my screen, and it's like, your front passenger tire is in critical condition. You're losing air. And I was like, the heck? So I figured, I'll just try putting more air in it. I'm at a gas station anyway, which is so lucky. We got that situation worked out and everything, but I really appreciated not having to get on the road and learn the hard way that my tire was It was just out. I had a flat tire. This thing will also tell me if the oil's low, if the coolant's low, or if the brakes are worn. It's really cool. And I really appreciate that. I didn't expect to appreciate that about a car like this. I couldn't have seen that coming. Stuff like that, you have to find out the hard way in a car that's 20 years old. Also, it's just built really well. It is a solid car. The steering is nice and heavy. Newer BMWs, they have electronic steering. It's just different. I hear it's different, and a lot of people appreciate the weight to the steering wheel of this particular model. The interior is in good condition. It's held up really well for a car that's 10 years old already. These things are also apparently very tunable. So all in all, I'm pretty sad to have left the DSM community. I still love the Eclipse. However, I ultimately went from one platform that I loved to another. A turbocharged all-wheel drive vehicle to a twin turbocharged all-wheel drive vehicle. I got a lot of what I wanted out of this car, and it's gotten me thinking a little differently about my tastes in general. I plan on giving more updates with this car on my new channel. It is lo-fi_335, and I hope that you may go over there and give me a follow so you can see how everything goes with this vehicle. And like I said, so far, I'm loving it. And maybe you'll come to like BMW too, if you don't already. Obviously, there's a whole world of things that can go wrong, but that goes for any vehicle. And honestly, I am comfortable with the risk I've taken up with this, just as I was with the car that I was putting everything into before. And I think now, after having some time to think about it, I've owned this thing for 8 months now. I think I've made the right choice, at least for now. Follow me on Instagram at lo-fi_335.